of Nintendo's legendary lineup of characters, you can probably pick out a song that is unmistakably that character's song. The overworld theme from Super Mario Bros. Is easily the plumber's most recognizable tune from his 35 years as a gaming icon. Same can be said about Link and the overworld theme from The Legend of Zelda. Island Swing has been remixed how many times for Donkey Kong and Super Smash Bros.? Nintendo just knows how to do video game music. It's such a big part of what makes these characters so memorable. And so when I think of Wario's theme, the choice is easy. WarioWare! Yeah, no. Wario's theme is, without a doubt, Greenhorn Forest from Wario World. Oh, I love it so much. It's just so fat. This is the chunkiest song I've ever heard. And it suits Wario just so darn well. I admit I wasn't planning to do a video on Wario anytime soon, but I'm a bit of a platformer enthusiast, and I've just been kind of sweeping through my backlog. I heard this song and it just sparked my interest to revisit this game for the first time since probably like 2003, 2004. It's been a while. It's been a while. So what can be said about Wario? Well, just go ahead and add him to Nintendo's growing list of neglected franchises. Specifically, his platforming adventures have really taken a back seat since, 2008? It's really been that long? Now, I gotta admit, I don't really have much experience at all with the Wario Land series. I only recently purchased and played Wario Land for the first time on my 3DS. Instead, my first exposure to the world of Wario was Wario World for the GameCube. Like I said, it's been quite some time since I've played this game, and so out of curiosity, I decided to look up some videos about it, and to my surprise, there weren't a ton of videos going very in-depth about this game. I rarely hear about it when people are discussing Wario titles. The focus is usually on the Land series, and after looking up the sales numbers, I can see why that is. According to my roughly 5 minutes of looking at the Wikipedia page, this game sold roughly around 400,000 copies, which they considered a commercial success? Now, maybe at the time in 2003 this was pretty good, but when you compare that to the insane numbers that Nintendo games are pulling today, this is a relatively minuscule puddle of people that have had the chance to experience it. And of course, with absolutely zero attempts to re-release this game over the years by Nintendo, aside from the Player's Choice re-release in 2004, the only option is to pay out the butt for it on eBay. Yippee! Also, did you know that this is Wario's first and only 3D adventure? Yeah, it's no freaking wonder this is the black sheep of Wario games. Luckily for me, I still have my copy after all these years, and I guess now is as good of a time as any to crack into it once again. So let's do it. Let's jump into the world of Wario.
Welcome to Wario World.
So when the game starts up, you were told there was once an evil gem that tortured the creatures of the world that has been laying dormant for a long, long time. Wario, the greedy, greasy asshat he is, stole the gem and thus reawakened the evil within. Now Wario has to try and stop this evil and win his treasure back. So yeah, as far as game stories go, this is pretty basic, but you know, it's a Nintendo game. You are then thrust into the hub world, where you'll notice a few branching paths that lead to each of the game's various worlds and levels. There are 4 worlds, each containing 2 levels and a boss. That doesn't sound like much, because it isn't. Wario World is not the longest game in the world. I would say in total it probably took me around 5 to 6 hours to 100%. It's a shame that there isn't more game to be seen here, but with that said, each level definitely gets their own time to shine, especially if you're aiming for 100% completion. But I'm getting just a little bit ahead of myself though. Let's talk about the level design. So Wario World is first and foremost a 3D platformer. Sort of. Like, you do move Wario around in a 3D space, but the levels are structured kinda like hallways. It's almost like if you were playing a Crash Bandicoot game from the side perspective. And you know, for what it is, I think this works pretty well. There's a lot of verticality to the way these levels are designed, lending plenty of opportunities for hidden treasure and various collectibles. This makes exploring and trying to track down all of the various goodies a blast, because there's usually something new to find around every corner. That's really what this game is about, finding goodies. It's definitely what I had the most fun doing. There are a plethora of collectibles in each level. I'm talking about 8 treasure chests, each color-coded that only appear after pressing their matching button, found somewhere throughout the level. 8 gold Wario statue pieces that when gathered grant you half a heart onto your total health. 5 of these little rainbow bean bastards that give you hints for finding treasure, and the more you find, the more appear on this dance sequence at the end of the game. Yeah, kinda. Okay, last but certainly not least, there are 6 of these red gems that you need to access the boss at the end of each level. Oh yeah, did I mention each level has its own boss? Now, each level has a certain number of gems required to finish it. You don't always need all 6, but if you don't happen to have enough, then you'll have to jump on this ball thing for a lift back to the start of the level. Yeah, normally this would be a pretty big turnoff and suck a major wheelbarrow of ass, but thankfully these levels aren't nearly as long as they might appear to be on your first pass through. On your first go, certain levels contain mini-bosses and arenas where you wipe out waves of enemies. On subsequent passes, these obstacles will no longer be an issue, so you can breeze right through a level in a matter of minutes when combing it over for those missing items. This, for the most part, made backtracking a breeze, aside from maybe 1 or 2 specific occasions. One instance in particular that comes to mind is this snow level, where you have to slide down this icy slope and grab the Wario statue pieces on your way down. If you happen to miss, and trust me, you're probably gonna miss, you have to go the whole way to the end of the level, grab the balloon to bring you back to the start, and try again. This is a pretty level-specific situation. I don't think there were any other BS moments similar to this throughout the rest of the game. But you know, aside from that, I found combing through these levels and scouring the environments for all the collectibles to be a lot of fun. Wario's a treasure hunter, and treasure hunting is the name of the game. Now, as I sort of alluded to, the only truly necessary collectibles are the red gems. All the rest of the stuff is just fluff that will help you get a better ending. It's kind of like the Luigi's Mansion approach. If you go out of your way to collect a bunch of the money and collectibles and goods, then you're treated to a better ending. I think this makes for a pretty satisfying balance for both casual players and completionists alike. If you just want to get to the end and fight the boss, it probably won't take you very long at all to do so. If you're like me and needed to get all the things, you're probably going to be looking at between 25 minutes per level to well over an hour for some of the later levels. I didn't really mind that when it comes to platformers, especially of the 3D variety. I love having stuff to collect. Doesn't matter what it is, just give me any kind of frivolous shit and I'll try to find it. I enjoy the hunt, but I could totally understand if spending more than an hour on a single level isn't your cup of tea. Unlike most of the collectibles in the game, the red gems aren't found in the overworld. Instead, they're located behind these doors that you can either ground pound through, or in the case of these solid doors, pile drive your enemies into and break their spines! The ones with the X's usually just have some sort of little puzzle to complete for the gem, while the banana slammadors will often contain some sort of platforming challenge. These aren't too bad early on, but yeah, the later levels, oh boy. Some of these later challenges get tricky, like really tricky. At the beginning of the game, it's like, follow this maze, cross these platforms, and you're golden. Or, jump over these spikes, grab the gem, and get out. Then in the later levels, it's like, grab the edge of this platform to lower it to get underneath the spikes, but don't go too low or you'll die. Jump on this spinny platform and get across these disappearing clouds. Or how about, jump across this weird gauntlet of twisting platforms without falling off? Yeah, nah. What about, jump on this cloud that disappears in a split second and try to shoulder bash jump to press this switch to remove the spikes from these ladders? What the fuck? What do I even do here? Oh god. Like I said, most of the time these challenges aren't too bad and are easily doable, and honestly, I don't think these later challenges would be so bad if it weren't for the controls. I would say that most of the time platforming isn't very intense in Wario World, but when it does ramp up, you're gonna know. Because Wario just feels weird. Like, in most instances, it's not too much of an issue, but the best way I could describe the way they feel would be lead on butter. He's heavy and slippery, which does not make for a super great combo on more difficult platform challenges. Adding on to this, I found that there's a weird delay when trying to execute a shoulder bash into a jump. Sometimes the jumps just straight up don't register, which made for quite a few mistakes along the way. I mentioned the one challenge where you have to jump on this cloud and shoulder bash jump to hit this switch, and it was one of the most obnoxious challenges in the game. The cloud disappears in a split second when you step on it. I can't tell you how many times I had to do this over and over and over again. What I had been doing was pressing the right shoulder button to dash and immediately pressing the A button to jump, and my jumps just weren't registering. What you actually need to do is press the shoulder bash, wait until Wario gets moving, and then press the jump button. Yeah, there's this little weird delay which can mess you up, especially in this instance where you only have a split second of wiggle room to work with. So I think that the controls of Wario World probably could have used some more fine tuning. They aren't exactly bad, just a little rough around the edges, at least when it comes to platforming. When it comes to the combat, that's where things start to look up a little bit. You see, Wario World isn't just all about platforming and collectibles. Unlike his boring one-note yeehaw hero counterpart, Wario has always been more of a brute, and they definitely wanted to showcase that here. I already mentioned his shoulder bash, which is a returning staple from the Wario Land series. Not nearly as useful here though. Then on top of that, you have this 1-2-3 punch combo, ground pound, and pile driver techniques. And if you're really looking to wipe out waves of enemies, Wario can stun, pick up, and spin the heck out of some of the bigger enemies, wiping out the rest with ease. This technique is also used for opening certain gateways to allow you to progress. The combat overall is pretty simple and easy to understand, but hey, it feels good to execute, and for Wario, I think this style of combat is a great fit. I think where it loses a little bit of the charm is the overall enemy variety. You'll be busting up the same types of enemies in every level. Usually a little guy, medium guy, and big guy are the common enemy types among a few others, typically getting reskinned to fit the aesthetic of whatever level they're in. This does lead to a bit of repetition with the enemy encounters, and I'll admit, by the end of the game, the combat wasn't my favorite thing about it, but with that said, not every wave of enemies is mandatory to defeat. You can often just sprint past them and keep moving along. The enemies are mostly just good for collecting coins and racking up combos to add to your score at the end of a level. The coins don't really serve much purpose. You use them to purchase garlic from this garlic vendor, which act as health points. They might also contribute to what kind of ending you get, but don't quote me on that. I do want to emphasize before I move on that the combat isn't bad. It's actually quite good and satisfying to wipe out waves of enemies, especially with this spin thing. It's just a bit repetitive by the end. Okay, so I actually forgot to mention dying. You see, dying in Wario World is actually another way that you'll be burning through those coins. If you happen to lose all your hearts, you need to spend a certain amount to go get back into the action. That's a nice thing about this game though. You don't need to start a level all over again. You pay the troll toll and get thrown right back into the action. And in my experience, I was never short on coins. Couldn't tell you what happens if you don't have enough to pay. It probably really is game over for you then. Another way that Wario World likes to sidestep your expectations of death comes in the form of falling. See, in your typical platformer, when you fall, that's it, you have become dead. But Wario World drops you into these little mazes, I guess you could call them, where you get chased around by these floating heads, and your objective is to find a spring in these boxes to send you back to the surface. These little underground sections don't serve much purpose outside of being coin graveyard. If you fall into the mysterious liquid, you lose coin. If you get chomped by one of these floating heads, you lose coins! And although it's nice not to have to worry about losing lives every time you fall over an edge, these sections can be tiresome after a bit, especially since the way out is never in the same place twice. Sometimes you find the spring right away. Others you'll be running around aimlessly trying to find that dang spring that was right next to where you started! Honestly, this mechanic wasn't too invasive for the most part. The ice level was, once again, the worst instance of this. There's these narrow, icy, slippery walkways that you have to traverse where these big fat ice cream cone guys bop around on that are there entirely for the sake of sending you to heck. Combine that with Wario's slippery feet and you'll be spending quite a bit of time down there. So, once again, this is kind of another half-baked mechanic. It's nice in the way that it's forgiving. You'd be out of lives in no time flat on this crappy ice path section, but it's just not really a fun feature. It's just kind of there. But what's not just kind of there are the bosses. I'll be taking that Transition of the Year award now, thank you. There's a boss at the end of each level and the end of each world, and they're weird and creepy, and I love them. Inflation! They're so out of place for a game in such close proximity to Mario, but that's why I'm really into it. It goes to show that Wario was once carving his own path, didn't need to follow in Mario's footsteps. Let's get weird. Now, I didn't find any of these guys to be particularly difficult outside of maybe these two. They usually boil down to waiting for them to go through their attack patterns and finding your window of attack. And then it's just a matter of either spinning or pile driving them into the ground. Not much variety in how you take them out. I don't really mind though. The boss encounters are genuinely unique compared to your typical Nintendo affair, and I don't know, I just dig how goofy they are. It's because of this weirdness that the final boss is a bit of a letdown. You pretty much just zip left and right avoiding lasers spraying these bean bastards until you can beat them up. Not really the most exhilarating final boss in the world, so after that you get to witness the Bean Bozo dance of diddliness for some reason, and roll credits. Yep. Well, that was a game. Is Wario World some genre-defining, console-selling masterpiece worthy of being called one of the greatest of all time? No. But also yes. I mean, no, it's not perfect, far from it. It has its fair share of rough edges, but it's still a really enjoyable game. Maybe not worth $60 for 5 hours of content, especially when it first released. Still couldn't recommend it for that today, but good luck finding a copy for less than $60. Nintendo's awkward pricing is still an issue that is felt to this day, nearly 20 years later. Guess that's a topic for a different video. But, you know, despite its flaws, I still gotta give Wario World my praise. If you ask me, the GameCube era was the last time we saw this massive push for Nintendo to try new things with all of their franchises, and Wario was no exception. Wario World was meant to be the next evolution of the Wario Land formula, and again, I can't stress this enough, it's not perfect, and it didn't need to be. Chances are when you try something new, it'll have its hiccups. That's something that Nintendo seems terrified of nowadays. They preach about how they like to try new things and make new games feel different from their previous installments, but at the same time, don't really take those leaps of faith that they were once known for. Yoshi's Crappy World is not much different than Yoshi's Woolly World. Kirby's Star Allies is not much different than any other Kirby game. They talk about wanting to preserve your nostalgia for their games, while also wanting to provide something new, but these philosophies are straight up at odds with each other. Let me tell ya, I would much rather take the Wario Worlds of Nintendo that try something new and provide a fun experience, but don't necessarily perfect the formula on the first go, than yet another nostalgia-baiting, safe-as-heck New Super Mario Bros. Game, or the 500th Zelda remake, or the same Yoshi and Kirby games again. I know I'm on a bit of a tangent, and you know, completely changing up a franchise's approach is risky and not always the answer, but in the case of Wario World, I think it was. This game deserved a sequel at least, to iron out the kinks of the first game and evolve the series further. Who knows, in a different timeline, Wario World may have become the flagship series for Wario, but yeah, we got stuck in the WarioWare timeline. Look at that shadow. Honestly, the majority of Nintendo's 2D series could benefit from a facelift in the third dimension. If you've been following me for a bit, you already know how I feel about that. I just really wish we could have seen Wario continue down this path. Imagine a Wario World game with the scale of, say, Mario Odyssey, treasure hunting galore across huge landscapes, the Indiana Jones of Wario. Dreaming makes me sad, especially since Wario's platforming adventures died in 2008. If you ever have the opportunity to play Wario World, I recommend it. Maybe someday Nintendo will revisit this style of Wario game. He has since been relegated purely to a Mario spin-off character, which is such a shame. I feel your pain, Wario fans. I really do. But in the meantime, you can check out Wario's one and only Forgotten 3D adventure. I'm Uncle Al, and I'll see you guys next time.